Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, a forum for business owners and senior executives to share the experiences about the elements that drive their success. Your host is Robert Brill, CEO of Brill Media.co.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today our guest is Isaiah McPeak, Head of Product at Pinwheel. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
So tell us a little bit about what you do and what Pinwheel is.
Okay, I'm a screen zombie hunter. So we are tackling the challenges parents face when it comes to giving their 8 to 12-year-old a phone, which is number one plan right now is wait till as long as possible. And we'd like there to be a better solution than throwing the car keys to a 16-year-old when they're ready to drive. You probably want to teach them how, but it's sort of hard when you have to disable adult smartphones and keep the disabling band-aids working, or give them a flip phone and be hated.
So you're a parent of an 8 to 12-year-old will download Pinwheel, or what's the actual application here?
Yeah, they'll actually purchase a phone. So we built from the operating system up a smartphone for kids, and it switches modes through the day to match their rhythms of life, school mode, night mode, free play mode, things like that. And it's safe. It's 100% tool, 0% toy. So there's no games on it, no entertainment. It teaches them that technology is to help them in their lives, and backs up the parent with making that really easy to pull off in their household.
And what's the science behind the design of the tool?
Yeah, so there's a ton, actually. So one of the country's top experts in kids and tech, who's a therapist and author of Tech Generation, Dr. Mike Brooks, is on our design team. And we have a whole therapist design council, and built 10 principles for what creates connected media and healthy tech. And that's behind every decision we've made.
And so you're the head of product and design.
Mm-hmm.
What is your how old is the company? Tell us about how you've grown it and what the milestones were along the way.
Yeah, so my co-founder and CEO and I are both veteran entrepreneurs, and he started this last September as an exploration in family tech, and did about 6 weeks of intense ethnographic market research, which I didn't really know what that meant. So I had to say, break that down for me. What is that? That means a researcher calling some families multiple times a day and asking them, what brands have you used in the last 3 hours? Take me around your home. Talk to me about this, about that, about decisions, and of course, tech, and running by some early wireframes. So convinced that there was a market, he called me and said, all right, let's do this. We need to make a phone for our kids. And so that was when I started. So that was last October. And, we can dig into all the milestones, but the quick version is we made an early prototype on what we thought would work, and learned we're going to have to customize the OS if we really want to do this right and not be victims of Apple or Google policy changes. And that's going to be stinking hard, and nobody's really done it. So let's do it. And then we released that MVP prototype in April in closed alpha. We went to a closed beta in July 1st. And now, actually, this week, we're working on going from closed beta to open beta.
And so how do you, what kind of growth can you talk about publicly for this? And I'm also really interested in how you built a phone, or how that process went.
Yeah, I think we're pretty happy to share in pretty much any and everything. So growth-wise, as you know, with a startup, you always are balancing the desire and appetite to grow faster with what kinds of operations cost that means for you. And you also don't want to spend marketing and sales dollars when the power of that dollar goes a lot less if you were to work out more kinks in the product, right? So we had about a 7-user alpha testing program. We figured like that was probably enough. And if you've ever read Marty Kagan's How to Build Tech Products That Customers Love, he's like 6 reference customers. That's the magic. I kind of agree with that. And so we started with those 7, and then we found out there's 2 really big differences in use case. One is a split home, and the other is a not split home. And when you're looking at a split home, you're looking at some pretty different motivations for getting your kid a phone, but a really big reason, which is I want to stay connected with my child. And so that was something we learned as we went to the beta, and the beta is about 20, and we decided to go from janky, unpaid, and we've done a lot of different advertising experiments to clamp it down and say it's got to be a paid beta. So we have to prove to ourselves that some people are willing to exchange money for this. Now, the prices may have been wildly all over the place, but they averaged to about what the price is, which is $200 for the device, and then $30 a month for service and the operating system. And that's been our growth strategy so far, is actually try to get to where we've got that referrals or I would be super, super disappointed to not have this product in my life anymore area. And we feel confident enough there to do a trickle of growth, but we're not going to spend $10K a month on ads or blow up a Kickstarter campaign just yet, because we still want to be learning. We have a lot more to learn before we spend those kinds of marketing dollars. We don't think they'll be the most efficient yet. Does that
And
answer your question?
yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. So like with your beta phase, when you were charging for the product, what were the channels that were driving some of those sales?
Yeah. So we had, let's see, we did a little bit of Facebook advertising in the spring, and we did this $1 reservation model. And then we tried to convert some of those into these paid beta. So a few of them did that. We also had a little discounting experiment running that had some motivation to go ahead and pre-order the phone. And a few of the paid betas were from there. And then we had a few that, as we unveiled our website and started doing just real basic posting about it in places and referring our friends some links or things to share, that our goal was to have second degree connections use it, and a few came from there.
That's amazing. So for the rest of this year, what are your goals for the rest of this year?
Yeah, so over summer we've been building out marketing growth infrastructure, and for me that means marketing automations, active campaigns up and running. We have a couple drips that are a few emails deep that need to go longer. We think our buy time is about 20 days to from knowing about it to talking to your partner about it and kind of deciding. And so this fall we're trying to optimize that nurture cycle and really help it be easy. So we're building out retargeting campaigns on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and then we're building out. I guess you still call it retargeting when you have email drips, but to me that's an email drip, a nurture, right? When it's people that that you're trying to push them through the process with case studies and things. So we figured out by now how to advertise for what I consider pretty cheap. So over summer, we're able to get people to give us their email on a form in Facebook for about 90 cents to 120 cents pretty reliably. We've got that throttled really low right now. It's like spending about $20 a day on that while we improve the next stage of the funnel experience for greater conversions. And then we're going to be ready to push some gas, I think.
I was going to ask you how important email addresses are to you, because what we find is generally like the more direct contact you have to a customer, the more ROI you can get over the long term.
Yeah, I think the email addresses are the key for us because this is a considered purchase. And so while we do have some contacts in other methods, I don't think we're going to see as much through Facebook Messenger or chatbots or things like that. It's different than buying a sonic toothbrush to buy like the phone your kid's going to use for the next 4 years that your partner also has to reliably agree on, if that makes sense.
So, are you relying on testimonials? I imagine that's a big part of your process, right? Like you get initial users, you get the testimonial. Are you using testimonials in your ads?
We are. We only have a few testimonials so far because we only have a few users so far, right? So it being mid-August is we're about to go to our beta group who started over the month of July, right? And right now, for me, the testimonials are more about the product than about the marketing. And if the testimonials aren't where we need to be, then for us, that just says keep improving the product, figure out why, until those testimonials sing. We have a few already that we're using, but the the dance between product and marketing here is definitely product first, instead of growth priorities. But we believe that that's an investment in greater growth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, it's interesting because I experienced the same thing with my business. I didn't want to go out to the market talking about, doing actual marketing and advertising until I was really until our product was really defined. And I haven't heard a lot of people say that, but I think that's such a critical part of the process.
Yeah, I think the difference is like if you're being category defining versus regressive and commoditized, right? So, there's a lot of advice out there of no, just sell, 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 and then build the product underneath. And I agree with that to an extent. Um, but at the same token, when you're doing something, if we were the fifth kids watch out there, then yeah, we would just describe a better kids watch that we had imagined and try to get pre-orders of that and then go build it. But with what we're doing, a kids operating system, it's so new and unexplored. We really have to have a lot of users and learn from them, not just describe what we have imagined in our heads as a reliable growth strategy at first.
How did you tell us about how you, I mean, to me, to manufacture a phone seems like might as well just be asking me to like figure out how to get to the moon. Like, it just,
Yeah. I'm pretty much in the same boat. I'm lucky here because my co-founder Dane, his last company was an Internet of Things company, and so they did software plus hardware, and he ended up selling that company and did it for 7 years. So he's really bringing the hardware smarts here, but what we're not doing is really manufacturing a phone. Instead, it's the operating system, and then you just have to tie that operating system to the firmware of a phone, which that is hard work, but it's not as crazy as I thought. So today, for example, we were just looking at our kind of final options for our next run, and there's about 7 options, and we're just weighing things like, can it be LTE? Can it be CDMA? Does it come with Android 9 versus Android 10 as a default before we go and bust it to pieces, and ungoogle it and install our own operating system? So there's a lot on Alibaba, and you can even take performing phones that you find on Amazon or whatever and go find the manufacturer. It's just a question of going back and forth until you find that minimum order quantity, the MOQ. And if you want to launch a 500 or 1,000 phone, then you're going to have to do something pretty magical to spend that much on inventory, right? And so those are the choices we've been having to make. But it's more choice and less figuring out on the hardware side. The hard part is the operating system.
that's fascinating. Tell us about how you started getting into design. When I see you graduated from Patrick Henry College, you have a fair bit of experience going on here, right? So tell us a little bit about how you came to this point in your career.
Yeah, I couldn't have started further from tech. Actually, my dad worked in government and still does. He was a career military intelligence, and then came back to the same job in a suit, which is where he still works, in the DC area. And I sort of followed those footsteps. We didn't know anything about business, and as an intelligence major, I started out creating information products, is what I now know. The language I use now is very tech oriented, but the language I used then was not. I created reports, right? But it turns out I was pretty inventive in terms of the information products that I created. And a lot of that had to do with sort of just a general classical liberal arts background and critical thinking from speech and debate for years. But bridged that over into, step one was work for an IT contractor that focused on government. And doing that and building a business unit from the ground up, I learned, whoa, I think I'm wired for this business stuff. And I started reading Inc. magazine religiously for almost a solid 3 years, just cover to cover. And I picked up the language of startups and tech startups, which I didn't even know. And it became just a goal. Like, I have to get out of government work and into a tech startup. And 9lenses on my background there was that, where I started working for a 4-time CEO who restarted a company from his basement. And I was his first employee, really. And the product manager, I was the product when we had to fudge it for some 3 years, and we built it all the way through Series A, $4.1 million growth round, and scaling. And I was, I stayed the product manager during that whole experience. So that was my cut my chops, teeth, whatever you cut in tech world bridging. But I still is the same thing. It's the same thing as being an intelligence analyst, which is how do you see all the big moving pieces, synthesize them, integrate them, create actionable intelligence or actionable steps that lead towards execution and faster learning, so that you can outsmart the enemy in military, or outsmart the not really the competition so much as the consumer in technology.
So when you're reading Inc. magazine and you realize you have this great deal of knowledge from the intelligence community or the government, how long does it take you to really understand that what you're doing has a direct corollary to the business world, right? Like you said, that happened as you were working, but how long did the things start to map from the intelligence and government world to the business world?
It was probably a 2.5, 3 year journey for me.
Really?
And most of it was putting language to things I'd already done that I didn't know. I mean, even take product manager, for example. Once I finally learned what a product manager was, I went and I talked to my CEO and I was like, hey, can we talk about some of my past experiences? I think I may have been one before. And we dug into it. He's like, oh yeah, you were a product manager of this manuscript, of that technical publication, of this and this. That's all product management. I didn't know that. So that for me was a big piece of that 2.5-ish year journey. And then the other piece was just being lucky enough to work at a government contractor that had won a new contract vehicle that it could bid on, and it was in Homeland Security. And the company had all done national security agency until that point, and they're just like, "Hey, Isaiah, try to figure this out, see if you can do something with it." And 2.5 years later, I've got 55 people in 4 government sites, and I did our health insurance. I learned how to do bids and proposals, and then we won contracts, and I learned how to set them up and negotiate with government officials and then run them. And that whole experience was, combined with the Inc. magazine stuff. I'm like, this is really cool. I think I understand what I'm doing now.
And it seems like you realize how much power you have, with the experience that you've had and the imagination that you have for what can happen in business. Is I can only imagine how excited you must have been at that point. Like, wow, there's a whole world of opportunity available.
Yeah,
With regard to,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying the feeling of what I noticed is that it's rare for someone to be able to see both big picture and small picture at the same time and fluidly bounce between them. I've also learned that since then that the way to describe that is product manager, right? Where you have to be able to be at the 50,000 foot view and all the way down to the tactical ticket level, this engineer view, and back at every 5 minutes of the day.
And it's a different, if you do that, if you're not the right person or you don't realize that that's happening, it's often very difficult to be able to go to oscillate from high view to low view very, very quickly, or alternatively to go from writing and interpersonal communications to like coding.
That's right. Yeah, it's just nonstop context switching, and there's nothing superior about being able to do that well in one way, because it also means you're probably I'm less likely to be the person who sits in the same code for 2 weeks solving some major problem and like loves it. I don't get in flow that way. I get in flow by bouncing around between things, right? And that's not everybody's wiring, and that's just we're wired different.
Going back to Pinwheel, when you started, when you and your co-founder made the decision to move forward with the business, what was the impetus, right? Like you didn't just go into the market and say, hey, we're gonna do product testing. There was some thesis prior to that. Is it a personal story? Did you was it market research? How did you get there?
Yeah, no, great guesses. Those are the two. So it was a personal story followed by market research, followed by a personal story. So the original personal story is actually my co-founder Dane's 7-year-old son's best friend, who's also 7, getting a phone, and it being this, what? My kids have to have phones? What is this sort of moment for him? And as he went out there and researched this, coming up dry with real solutions. Disabling adult technology is not a fun thing for a tech dad to really get into. And so he starts noodling on that and starts the market research, which I already described as intense, but it led to, you can actually see this poster behind me. That's actually the word cloud produced by the market research expert that he worked with, a consumer brand person in New York, who this is all she does. And we came out with, we understand motivations and really what's involved here. And there's a space for a brand that, I mean, I'll just ask you, you may not have kids, so I don't actually know, but what brand would you turn to? What big tech company would you turn to and say they have the best interest of kids in mind?
I will tell you the answer. I have a 20-month-old, and the answer for any question you can ask me is the Wiggles.
The Wiggles. I love it. Yes. Well, wait for Caillou.
Okay.
You're gonna go brain dead.
But I think your answer is I mean, the default for phones and technology is going to be Apple followed by Android.
Yeah, but you would never describe that as a parent as, oh yeah, Apple and Google have my child's best interest in mind when they design these. Instead, you're going to say, yeah, there doesn't seem something quite right. And if you dig deep, you're going to say, oh, it's probably because YouTube Kids makes $750 million a year on advertising to children and is monetizing their attention. And once you find that, you're like, what do I do? And so that was pretty convincing to us. And then it was real for us. And I had the same problem. He literally called me and said, we need to do this. Within 12 hours of me having my latest argument with my 11-year-old as to why she doesn't have a phone, and despairing, like I want her to learn technology, but I don't like any options, and she'll hate me for a flip phone. That's not even worth getting, but I can't do this smartphone thing. And he calls me the next day and he's like, hey, parents are stuck between these two options. I'm like, I know that. I just had that argument. Like, well, you want to solve that problem? Yes. So that was what signed me up.
Well, and I also, not knowing too much about your space in particular, I imagine there are, with a fair amount of research, a parent can find tools that probably exist but are not well branded, are not particularly well designed, are much more, I hate to say this, but probably much more of a money grab. Just like an existing tool, an existing phone, probably no name brand, manufactured elsewhere, China probably. And next thing you know, you have a tool that is moderately good, generally doesn't do what you need it to do, but it's marketed towards kids, and there's no brand. So I think as you look, it makes sense to me that as you look at it, you see that there is no real branded tool in the marketplace to solve this problem. And it could easily become your brand name could easily become synonymous with exploratory phones for young children.
Thanks for saying that. That is exactly how Dane described it at first. He's like, Isaiah, the real play here, yeah, we got to make a kid phone. The real play is to become the brand that parents trust. And there's nobody who's really pulled that off. And there's only one or two people trying. And more power to them. I think for us, this is like all boats rise as the oceans rise. So we're pretty familiar with who else is out there. And we think that the depth of the therapist backing, brain science, those things are probably better, but we really just want there to be more options for parents. And there's not.
How do you, when you think about marketing, right? There's the everyday, the immediate need. I got to sell stuff. And then there's the brand. I've got to build a brand so people have a great relationship with me. Tell us about how you make those decisions in how you spend your time and your money.
Yeah. So this area has for sure been a tension for us, and we've actually burned through a couple of different folks on the marketing side that we thought would be co-founder level. And for us, some of the traditional, discounting and gamesmanship that you can do in business to consumer doesn't really make sense for what we're trying to do. And we know and believe that wellness is at the core, and there has to be a virtuous cycle here. And until we have that virtuous cycle ignited, we don't want to push too much gas with other tactics, because then you're going to exhaust yourself. And we don't want to be out there on Instagram using the same tactics as everyone else when we're selling essentially an anti-Instagram phone for kids, right? And so for us, it's unlocking the community referral networks is the number one challenge that we're trying to break through, and finding who are those trusted voices, where are these people, often not digitally, that we can get to. So the areas that are showing promise are schools, for one. Schools are trusted sometimes to help select technology for children and bring parents together to hear about that. Therapists, actually, it's becoming, in the last 5 years, it's gone from a dirty word to a great word. Thanks, Brene Brown. And, they love what we're doing. And so that's a channel. And then we're looking at the split homes thing, which is really interesting to us. And even family attorneys may become a channel there for us. So we're very much looking at the referral game as most important. And once that's singing, we feel like we can back it with other standard marketing tactics.
I would imagine tutors are also very important, or could
Yes.
be important.
Actually, it's funny. I was testing out a piano teacher channel, and can we get included in your list to your 400, 500 students in this town? And it's neat because we have one going out soon, a soccer coach who he didn't even want to be paid, didn't want to affiliate or anything. He just, this is cool. This is needed. Yes, I'd be happy to tell my families about this. So I think right now until there's another competitor, like that's a real power of being first. Sometimes I've experienced this before once, is people do pick up the phone. They do like what you're doing and they're willing to tell others without any compensation or, quid pro quo involved. So we want to see if we can make that magic happen. It's called a halo effect sometimes, where if you are spending, sometimes you don't get that effect.
Right. It's a question of scale. I mean, look, I was having this conversation with one of our clients, and the core of the conversation was no one would really do marketing, advertising, paid media, PR, promotions, any of that if they could sell, I'm making it up, 20 million chocolate bars for Hershey's a day or whatever it is. The only reason Hershey's advertises and does any marketing is because they need to sell chocolates and they can't do enough of it. It can't scale enough, right?
Right.
So if you could run your whole business and never have to create a YouTube video, never run an ad, why would you?
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
cool.
I think, one of the statistics that jumps out to me, and I don't know if this is exact or I couldn't give you the link, but still the majority of sales are done through referral, and marketing, in my opinion, is still competing for the smaller half of total attention. So something like 60% versus 40% that marketing is competing for. I want to make sure the 60% is up and running with a new product. And then the 40% is more of the scale opportunity.
Right, because you're taking the risk to carve out a completely new product. How would you describe, not a new product, a new industry, a new vertical, a new category?
Yeah, it's a new product category.
So you have the benefit of that, right?
Yeah.
For us, for example, there are many different advertising and marketing firms.
Right.
So we have to yell out in order to get noticed. But also word of mouth. I mean, look, the interesting part about our business is that word of mouth is still the most critical part of how we've grown.
Yeah. People, as they're inundated with information, have to go back to trust as the primary way to make decisions.
This is kind of an off-topic question. Well, two questions here, right? You're coming into this business in a very odd time for the world. I just read an article yesterday from I think it was either Wall Street Journal or New York Times, talking about, we are collectively as a global society going through a collective life quake, a big change that happens in one's personal life. Usually, it's not usually global, that will have reverberating effects for the next 5 years of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
In the decisions we make, and the way we choose to live our lives, and the way we work, where we live, all that stuff. Lots of changes happening now with unintended consequences for our society. I'm going on a tangent here. One thing I read, I think I actually heard it on a podcast, was that after a plague in the 1300s, approximately, inadvertently, because of the situation with the plague, it brought down the whole feudal system.
Mm-hmm.
in Europe. Right. So complete unintended, not predicted. So I guess the point is, how have the last 3-4 months been for your organization? I imagine in a time of growth, I firmly believe in a time of growth and change, there's massive opportunity to grow. Yeah. So in one way, I could say this is incredibly advantageous for you. Tell us about how the last few months have been for you guys.
Yeah. So it's been a little all over the place, as you'd expect, especially since early on, you couldn't tell how soon this was going away, right? But I think a couple of the most interesting decisions or thoughts are, first of all, we immediately killed our Kickstarter campaign. we were going to actually run that last spring. And the second COVID started to look as dangerous, as we didn't even know, not even close to, we just decided this is too uncertain for people to be taking this risk or to try to be a voice heard in this moment, right? Um, and then second thing on the very plus side is being tied, we're closely tied to some of the startup communities and venture capitalists around here. And there's a notion that, oh, people aren't investing, but that's a misnomer, and it usually is. And so what actually is the most powerful thing for us, we believe, is to be one of the last people standing who have a good opportunity worth backing with money. And that actually is going to work in our favor as we go out and raise funds, is people do have money sitting around, and the people who have a lot of money sitting around want places to put it. And if it looks like you can survive and thrive during this sort of pandemic, then you're most likely to be a recipient of that, and therefore be able to power through, succeed, and grow. So for us, it's a phoenix ashes timing. Looks great from that perspective. And then I think the last bit is just consumer behavior. The biggest piece that I've noticed us thinking about is we really thought of Christmas sales as the thing for what we're doing. But as these timelines and pressures change, there's a growing, school is taking a greater role in every parent's life than before. It's not a place now where you send your child so you can go to work. It's part of your every life decision, and it's still like all over the place. And so we're starting to think that the timelines may be end of school and beginning of the next school year as, competitively significant events compared to Christmas.
Do you have an ultimate goal with this business? Right? Some founders start a business because they want to earn a living and
Right.
just have the lifestyle. Some people want to exit at some point. I could totally see you guys getting massive, and like Apple or Google or some or Motorola or Qualcomm or whoever buys you guys. Like what do you guys want to happen?
Yeah, what we want to happen is obviously we want to build the family tech brand that people trust and be the intersection of family, wellness, and kids and tech. But when you're an entrepreneur, you have to plan for multiple exit pathways, and so of course we see acquisition as a potential pathway. But as we think about that, we have a philosophy, and it's a very well documented. This is our product philosophy, and we are designing this for our own kids. And that's not just to say nice. I've already given this to my older daughter. I'm going to give it to my next daughter. And so we want this to be the right wellness-backed, wellness-centric solution out there. So I think the potential acquirers are closer to, say, an AT&T, who they don't have a smart kids watch yet. The other big ones do, or a tech company that's not making iPhones or Android revenue on apps, right? So it would probably be somebody else. Qualcomm's not a bad guess. Could be a phone manufacturer, that direction. But I think there's definitely a philosophical angle where you have to buy the sauce to want to work with us, of like this whole tool, not toy thing. And not everybody's going to want to do that.
Right. Culture and DNA are important. You can't
Yeah.
you can't go work for the enemy or whatever. Well, cool, Isaiah. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for joining us. Let me ask you a couple more brief questions. How can people find you? How can people find Pinwheel?
Okay, so pinwheel.com is how to do it. And there's a fun story. We just got that domain. And we believe in domain authority and backed it with some interesting investment.
Who had it before? What kind of business had it before?
Okay, so we've been on Pinwheel.io for most of the year. And then we knew at the beginning who had it. It's actually the founder of Flickr. She had the domain, and she tried some other business called Pinwheel.com, and it didn't really go anywhere. And she's been sitting on the domain, wanted to sell it for $125,000. And we didn't have $125,000, and said, no way. But then what happened is this summer, there's another company we saw named Pinwheel that got a huge money raise. I forget if it was like 3, 4, 7 million, something like that. And they're a B2B company. They don't do anything close to what we do, but they are called Pinwheel. Like, well, this is our shot. So we came up with this scheme. It makes a lot of sense. My co-founder just bought the domain himself, is leasing it to our company. So, if we don't succeed for whatever reason, then he can still sell that domain back. So we didn't risk our startup's limited resources on a domain like that, but set it up in a structure that made much wiser sense for us, but that allowed us to still get the domain. And immediately our Google web rank, whatever it is, improved by 94 million overnight.
Yeah,
it's a good start.
Yeah. I imagine. Yeah, that's good. So cool. Pinwheel.com, the storied name behind what I think is going to be a fantastic brand. Thank you for joining us today. I look forward to watching you guys grow, Isaiah.
Thanks. It's been real fun to talk to you. Great questions.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.